Welcome. I'm Julie Bacon, and you're listening to the Mindset Coaching for Handlers podcast, a podcast for dog handlers who are on a mission to achieve big goals. Here I share lessons, insights, personal stories, and tools you can apply during your next show, trial, or test to help you strengthen your mental game and hopefully cue more consistently. Be sure to check out the show notes where you'll find details about the episodes, plus important links, including the link to the Dogged Planner and Workbook created just for handlers on a mission. So if you're ready to improve your competitive mindset, get out of your own way, and connect with your dog like never before, then it's time to get comfy, bring an open mind, and work your mindset. Hey there, welcome back to the podcast. All right, this week we're talking about an old adage, that do it anyway adage, which comes up when people say, well, of course I'm afraid, of course I have fear, but I do it anyway. And I think this is both a great and a terrible adage, okay? Because I think it gets kind of misconstrued. And so we're going to unpack that a little bit because we need to understand fear, and we need to understand this doing it anyway, and this concept of like, well, yeah, I push through, and when do we push through? So there's actually kind of more to it, because I think that some people who just say like, yeah, I'm afraid, but I do it anyway, aren't admitting the whole story, right? Or aren't letting you in on some of the inside scoop. So first of all, remember, when we talk about fear, especially in this context on this podcast, in my life as a mindset coach, most of the time fear comes off as nervousness, right? It comes off as, performance anxiety. It comes off as fear of failure, or, being afraid that you're going to make a mistake, or that you're not going to cue and therefore not finish the title, and therefore not be able to go to the big show or get the award or the certificate or whatever from your home club. Like, there's a million dominoes, right, that happen. And it all starts with us being afraid or fearful or nervous or, whatever, wherever you are on that continuum, that we are not going to get the outcome that we want. Right? Again, most of the time, you are not afraid that you're not going to be able to connect with your dog. You're afraid that if I don't connect with my dog, he might, run out or take an extra jump, or, in obedience or something, just sniff in the corner for 5 minutes while I'm calling him. That's what we're afraid of. We're afraid of the outcome. We fear those outcomes happening. And sometimes we fear them because they've happened in the past, and we're afraid of the past repeating itself. And we've talked about that a little bit. But most of the time we are afraid because we're not going to get the outcome we want, or we're afraid of an outcome, of getting an outcome like running off and sniffing in the corner or something and completely ignoring us or blowing us off or whatever. And in and of itself, our dogs blowing us off, like if they were doing that at home, it would just be another Tuesday, right? But when they do it in public, they embarrass us, or, other people see it, and then I have to deal with people coming up to me and the unsolicited advice. And again, there's dominoes to it, because when we as humans think through something, we like to think all the way through it. We think through every last domino. And especially those of us who are recovering perfectionists and recovering control freaks out there, we're control freaks because it's a fear move, right? It's based out of a fact of, well, we don't want something to happen. So if I can control all the factors, then that thing that I'm afraid of won't happen. And so when we do that, though, we think, that's what I mean by thinking all the way down the dominoes. We think that like, oh my God, if I don't have my dog's connection, then he's going to blow me off. And if he blows me off, he might end up sniffing in the corner. If he ends up sniffing in the corner, Suzy Q outside the ring is inevitably watching. And then they're going to come up to me afterwards, and then they're going to give me unsolicited advice. And then my whole breed club, and right? I mean, I could take that on to infinity, and we've all done it. I've done it. I have done it too. We've all played that game. Okay. So I just want to set the context of when we talk about fear in this context, it takes a lot of different forms. We all have fears. We all have different levels of anxiety. And I know that in this culture now we talk about everybody's got anxiety, and sometimes it's diagnosed and sometimes it is anecdotal. And so I don't want to I don't want to either misuse that word, nor do I want to minimize that word. Okay. So I always want to be careful with using, kind of clinical terms or terms that can be clinical, right? And so, but we could be just a little case of the butterflies, all the way up to downright, thrown up in the trash can before we walk in the ring, right? It's a continuum, and it is dependent on the dog. It's dependent on the situation. It's dependent on the trial. It's dependent on so many factors. So I just want to put that out there, that fear is going to take a lot of different forms. And we also have to remember, and you've heard me talk about this before, so I know you're experts on this, but when we are in a fearful state, or we are nervous, or we are, even if we're just a little bit nervous, all right, I mentioned the butterfly nervous, right? Just a little bit of nervous. We could be also excited, because fear and excitement take the same form in the body. Like when I'm excited to walk into the ring, like it feels a lot the same, right? It feels, everybody is going to describe it as different, but sometimes, yeah, my stomach does feel a little fluttery, or, sometimes I just feel like I'm buzzing, like I'm not very grounded. I just feel almost like I'm out of my shoes, sort of like floating and I don't know, just not grounded. And so we all can describe that feeling. And I might be excited or I might be nervous. And the reason it feels a lot alike in the moment, and the reason we can confuse one for the other, which happens a lot, mistake our excitement for nervous and think, oh no, I'm nervous, is because our minds, our brains, the way they send the signal is they see a situation. So you walking into the ring with your dog, and they ask the middle brain. Now, of course, I'm oversimplifying all this, but they ask the midbrain, hey, is this a thing? Like, should I be worried about this? And your midbrain looks at it and is like, yeah, better send the lizard. And so it sends the signal back to your amygdala, that primal brain, the one that keeps you breathing and your heart pumping and your blood flowing, and often called the lizard brain. And it says, hey, we got a code here. Like, we need to be worried. And in that split second that all of that happens, your amygdala, your lizard brain, that primal part of you, redirects blood flow. It changes the way you breathe. It floods you with hormones. It does a lot of things, a lot of really impactful things. When it redirects blood flow, for instance, it can take up to 30% of blood flow away from your brain and redirect it to your big muscles, right? Because in case you have to run for a bear. I mean, the amygdala doesn't know what you're afraid of right now. It just thinks like, I got to prepare. Or maybe prepare to be excited and jump up and down and yell and scream and be happy. Either way, I'm going to need my big muscles. Either way, I'm going to need my heart going a little faster, my breathing to be a little more shallow. And I certainly don't need blood flow going to my digestive system. So yeah, I might feel a little sick to my stomach. I might get a headache from the shift in the blood flow. So all of that is happening. And oh yeah, the hormones are flooding, like the whole thing. Okay. So it is a real physiological response. Okay. So let's go back to what we're talking about, which is the do it anyway concept. So I feel like this started from somebody who once, was ready to go either maybe into battle or onto the athletic field, or who knows, maybe take the SATs. I don't know their lives. And they were nervous or excited or both. And they were like, well, yeah, I'm nervous, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to walk into that ring anyway. And I think that's amazing. And I think we've all done that, right? We've all been nervous, but we walked into the ring anyway. And some of us are thinking, well, of course, like what choice did I have, right? Like, what was I going to do? Be like, nope, not today, and turn around, because that would have been more embarrassing at the ring. So I'm not doing that. Although I know a couple people who have done that. And they walk into the ring anyway. So they're thinking, of course. And so the reason I wanted to unpack this is because I think that when we hear that phrase, it minimizes, or it can minimize, what we're feeling or what we're going through. Because ring nerves are a real thing. And when we don't get our ring nerves at least under control to the point of our comfort level, then it can get in our way. It can get in our way of our performance. We can get on course and halfway through we forget. We get in the obedience ring and we get lost in the corner for a minute and we don't remember what we're doing or how we're cueing our dogs, or we disconnect for a minute and our dog's like, oh, that's my opportunity. She disconnected. I'm out. Or we're just sending really nervous signals down the leash to our dogs and our dogs are like, ooh, I don't like how this is feeling. I don't like how this is going. I don't want to play today or I don't want to play in the same way. And then we have that phrase like, oh, well, it depends which dog shows up. Meanwhile, the dog's like, depends which handler shows up. So all of this plays into a part. So when we say to ourselves or we say to someone else, like, yeah, we're nervous, but even when you're afraid, you do it anyway. I just don't want to gloss over the fact that all fear, all nerves, all butterflies are not created equal. And that for some of us, like I have said many times in this podcast, that I enjoy a certain amount of intensity. I don't necessarily enjoy that much being nervous. Okay. Now, I have gotten to a point in my mindset journey that I am not nervous very often because I know that when I am nervous, it is a sign that I'm focusing on the outcome and not on the process. So when I start to feel nervous, I have tools in my toolbox, my proverbial imaginary toolbox, that I can grab that says like, you must be focusing on your outcome. What is it about your process goals that need your attention right now? And I can bring my mind back to that moment, get myself recentered, or like I will literally wiggle my toes in my shoes to make myself feel the ground when I feel that sort of like lifted out, that very ungrounded feeling that I get when I'm not connected to myself, to my body, to my dog, certainly, and to kind of the earth, like the literal earth. That's kind of one of my feelings. So I've gotten to a point of awareness and comfortability with my tools that I know that when I feel X, I can do Y. If I feel Q, I need to do Z. I know that I have tools to pick from that I have cultivated over time and worked with and practiced with, that I know how to get myself back to center. So when we think about this idea of when you're afraid, do it anyway, there are a few other things to unpack, and I'm going to get to that in just a minute. Quick question. Do you ever wish you had more mindset help? Well, the Q membership was created just for that reason. Every month we pick a topic and then we have 4 lessons, which are kind of like these podcasts, that we dive deeper into. And so if you are ready for more, you're ready for more mindset work, think about joining the Q membership. Annual members get a free coaching session, but you can also choose the monthly option as well. Go to theqcoach.com to learn more. Let's get back to the episode. Okay, so we're talking about, doing it anyway when you are afraid or fearful or anywhere on that fear continuum from, little butterflies all the way to downright, panic attack kind of situation. All right. And again, I feel like the person who made that up kind of maybe felt like they didn't have any choice, or too bad, so sad, tough it out. And you just have to push through. I do believe there is a time for pushing through. I do believe in developing mental toughness and grit. I'm spending a whole month on that in the membership, right? We're doing mental toughness and grit. They're getting a preview of my course that will drop in July. And so I believe in that wholeheartedly. There is a time for that. But if your fear, your anxiety, your nerves are getting the best of you on a regular basis, then it's not necessarily the time to push through. It's the time to look at it and figure it out. Now, you're not going to do that when you are 2 dogs out, or you're the dog on deck and you're about to walk into the ring. But you can learn some easy tools like taking a deep breath, squiggling your feet in your shoes, making sure that you are connected to your dog, coming up with some rituals. There are so many things that we can do to get us back to center. And what we are really doing in that moment is we are getting back to the present moment. Because again, when we are really nervous, we're thinking about the outcome's in the future. And instead, we need to refocus and think about what we need to do in this present moment in order to perform. So maybe the person who made up that, if you're afraid, do it anyway thing was really good at, focusing back on their performance goals. And they were really good at getting themselves back in the present moment and the thing that they needed to do. I just feel like that whole phrase and quote is doing us a disservice because I think they're cutting out big parts of the story. So I'm going to give that person credit. I'm going to decide that they were an Olympic athlete and they were like, yeah, I'm afraid every time. Every time I step to the edge of that high dive, which I'm watching swimming on TV at night, I'm afraid every time I step to that high dive, but I do it anyway. Well, that feels like oversimplification, right? That person is schooled in a lot of mindset, a lot of skills, and probably what they're describing is that feeling of being a little bit nervous or a lot a bit nervous, and that adrenaline that comes and the excitement that comes and the decision that of course they are going to, quote, do it anyway. They are going to masterfully jump off that high dive and do all the fabulous things on the way down. And they're able to do that. But in saying that phrase, I think they're cutting a lot of the work out and not giving credit to all of the work that it takes to be able to work through fear, anxiety, ring nerves, and be able to perform. All right. So I don't want you to be misled by that phrase. I want you instead to unpack it and be like, well, what's my secret? What's my personal secret to being able to walk to the line, be worried, be nervous, maybe even be petrified, and be willing to do it anyway? Because I doubt that your coach is physically pushing you into the ring, right? I mean, it's a great visual, right? Sitting outside and thinking about your instructor, like throwing you and your dog into the ring and being, you'll be fine, but I doubt that's happening. Actually, I really strongly doubt that that's happening. So instead, what we have to figure out is what are our tools? What are our go-to tools? What are our quick tools, the things that we try really quick that usually works? And maybe what are our secondary tools that if we need a little more help or we really are struggling, like what do we do with that? So let's give you a few. I mentioned breathing, right? I mentioned that, the deep breaths. Now, the reason this works, people always roll their eyes at this. Take a few deep breaths and they're like, yeah, right. And I'm like, okay, well, that wasn't a deep breath. So you're mocking me. Okay. And but the reason the deep breath works is remember all that stuff I said about what happens to us physiologically when we are in a fear state of any kind. Our breath is shorter, right? We have shortness of breath. It's not as deep as it normally is in a resting position. So when we take 1, 2, preferably 3 deep, full breaths, inhale, exhale, slow it down. We're doing several things. 1, we're getting some deep breaths in because we were shallow breathing. 2, we're actually slowing our heart rate down. And 3, we are sending a very clear signal to our brains that no, I'm not being chased. I'm fine. I'm safe. Look, I can control my own breathing. And would I be able to control my own breathing if a bear, in fact, was chasing me? Chances are no. Who's stopping to take 3 deep breaths after, from running from the bear, right? So nobody's doing that. So it is a very strong physical and mental signal to your brain that you are safe, which allows your brain to sort of relax, stop flooding with all the hormones, stop with all the heart rate stuff, stop with all the blood flow redirecting. Right? And get back into normal, right? The feet in your shoes thing, squinching your feet in your shoes works in a couple different ways. It's a distraction, okay? Because now you're thinking about your toes in your shoes and how can I feel the ground if they're really in my shoes? Am I touching the soles of my feet and da-da-da-da? And just even having those thoughts, you've shifted your thinking, you're distracting. And again, by distracting, you are enabling the front of your brain to get back to work. And that's what we need in that moment, right? We need the frontal cortex to get back to work. I need my plan, I need the course, or I need the pattern, or whatever it is that I am about to do. I need to be thinking. I need my rational self to show up. The part of me that says, hey, don't forget your rituals. Hey, don't forget to connect to your dog. All those don't forgets, those live in the front of our brains, which is why when we are really going through it, we can forget the course, forget what we're doing, or forget entire runs, come out of the ring and be like, I have no idea what just happened, right? And that's why, okay? So that's a thing. And then the distraction further, one of my favorite ways to get the blood flowing back to the front of our brains and get to thinking again is to look down at those shoes and be like, how long have I had these shoes? Where did I get these shoes? Were these on sale? And ask yourself simple but thoughtful questions that just make you think for a second and just make you think that like, ooh, these are older shoes. Yeah, you know what? I might be time to replace these shoes, or I did get them on sale, or nope, paid full price and proud of it, right? So whatever that is for you, again, it's making yourself think. And in those cases, it's making yourself actually look back in your memories and like go in those like imaginary file folders for information and be like, oh, yep, I remember I bought them on Zappos, got them the next day and used a gift card. Fantastic, right? Again, distraction, but getting your frontal cortex back engaged. Now, those things that I mentioned, you can all do on deck or even right before you take the leash off, okay? Other things that I like to do is I, of course, work through my ritual, which I've worked through from the morning I wake up until the time I walk to the line. And some of those last things mean saying the same things to my dogs and doing some of the same warm-up exercises. And they're kind of warm-up / attention exercises just to make sure that we're both on the same page. And, the last thing I do before I run an agility or any actually sport with my dogs, I always say, thanks for playing with me, because it wasn't their idea to do that. Right. And I think we heard Cynthia Horner last week say good luck, which I thought was so cute. And it's that very confident, what I love about that one, it's like, all right, we're a team here. I'm going to leave you now. Good luck. You got this. Right. And for me, it's just a very motion to gratitude of like, yeah, thanks for doing this, because it wasn't your idea to sign up for this event. It was mine. And it also kind of reminds me like, oh yeah, what's my why? Like, this was my idea. This is supposed to be fun. Okay. So build in some of those things, and if you know these things, if this is repetitive for you, if you've heard me say these things before, brush up on them, okay? Because I guarantee you that there's been a time in the last couple months that you've walked into the ring and you were like, why am I nervous? Or why am I not running the way I've been running or was running, 2 months ago? Where's that version of me? Go back, always go back to the fundamentals, go back to simplifying it, go back to the things that you did to get you to this point, right? You didn't just fall out of bed, pick up the nearest dog and walk to the ring. You've been preparing for this, you've been trialing, you've been practicing, you've been, working with your instructors, your coaches, what have you. You trust your skills, trust your dog, trust your process, but commit to doing those things that work time and time again. Some people say that they're superstitious about those. So that's why they always walk their dog for 10 minutes or do this or do that, right? I call it intention. I was a very superstitious person when I was younger. And now I look back on it and I'm like, yeah, some of it was hocus pocus, but some of it was intention. That every time I did that whatever that was, that activity, even putting my right boot on first in the morning, that was an intention. And I was intending that yes, I'm doing this because when I do this, I have a good day. Well, I was just intending to have a good day, right? When I walk my dog in the morning and they get their 10 minutes of walk in the morning, they're, better for it and we're all just better. Well, yeah, of course, right? So when we do things with intention, yes, I want things to be habit. I want things to be reflexive for you and easy for you. But when we do them with intention, we are really thinking about why we're doing the thing, why it matters, why we started doing it to begin with. And it starts to ground us back into those process goals and keeps our attention off of those outcome things that we want so badly. Okay. So I just wanted to talk about fear in this context of this do it anyway thing, that it's not just about I'm terrified and someone pushes me off of a cliff, right? It's actually about unpacking our fear, being aware of it, understanding what the tools that we have at our disposal to get us back grounded or get us back reconnected to the moment, to the present, to our dogs, to the handlers we know we can be, and then being able to run at our best and perform when it's our turn and be able to walk to that line fully in the present moment, like focused on the 3 things that we need to do to get through this course or this pattern or, this moment, and be able to do that without this just ultra focus on the outcome in the end and the drive home and how we did or didn't do that weekend. Okay. So my homework for you is to look at that. Are you just kind of mindlessly going through some of these habits, or are you being really conscientious and intentional about them? And then secondly, like, how do you feel? I'd be just curious, and feel free to like message me or whatever. I love when I get messages from y'all, but just feel free to message, like, how does that phrase hit you now? That if you're afraid, do it anyway. Like, how does that hit you now? Like, for me, I'm like, yeah, there's a lot more to that phrase. That's how that phrase hits me. And that's why I wanted to share that. But I'd be curious on how it hits you now, especially after this little chat. All right. Well, whatever you are up to this week, I hope you are having a fantastic week with your dogs. Thanks so much for listening to the Mindset Coaching for Handlers podcast with me, Julie Bacon. I am so grateful for your precious time. Check out my Dogged Planner workbook and journal available on Amazon. Just search for Dogged Planner. I also offer monthly membership that's perfect for ongoing support of your awesome goals. Check out theqcoach.com for details, or just stop by and check out all the ways you can work on your mindset. And be sure to follow me on Facebook and Instagram at theqcoach and let me know how it's going. Finally, please share, subscribe, and leave a review. This helps us podcasters tremendously. Plus, I know I get my best podcast recommendations from friends. Thanks, and have a great week with your dogs.